Welcome back to Matt's Point Tennis. I'm Matt Kuzdub. I'm a performance tennis coach. I've been working with players for nearly 2 decades, and I'm here today to talk about the impact point. So we're going to go through 3 primary reasons why the impact point is important, why you should be focusing on it. So just a little bit of the intro here. We're going to talk about what we mean in regards to the impact point, what that really is, why it's something that you should focus on, and the 3 main reasons why the impact point is so critical when it comes to becoming a better tennis player. And we focus on the impact point with all levels of players. So when I get a player that's new, whether that's a club player, whether that's a college player or developing junior, this is typically the starting point because it provides me with really rich information about the player. And we're going to go through what that information is detailed in the 3 reasons. So what do we mean by the impact point? In essence, the interaction between the ball and the racket, the string bed. Okay, that's our contact point, our impact point. But when we're talking about it, we're trying to really categorize it in terms of the height that we're making contact with the ball off the ground. And as we'll see, that height is important for a number of factors, but it'll change depending on the shot that we receive, okay, or how we move towards the ball and so on. Typically, this is a general rule of thumb, when we're looking at rally shots, rally situations, so you're behind the baseline, you're a little bit further back, we want to make contact with the ball between hip and shoulder height for the most part. We want to avoid making contact below hip height. That's typically not going to produce the best types of strokes, and we'll get into why. And we don't want to hit the ball above shoulder height when it's a rally ball. On drive balls, so balls that we're leveling out a little bit more, hitting more direct, these types of shots will have a slightly different impact point. It's going to be higher, it's going to be more around shoulder level, somewhere between chest and eye height, because we want to meet the ball higher and try to direct it, more level, sometimes a little bit downwards, depending on where we are in the court. But these are typically more, attacking situations, or we're building the point, trying to put pressure on our opponent. On defensive shots, we're more or less in emergency situations, so it doesn't really matter. We're more talking about the impact point in scenarios and situations that are more in our control, or we have a direct, for lack of a better term, impact on. Okay, so we'll get to all those other factors shortly. There's a big timing component, and that's going to be something that we will talk about. Reason number 1 that you need to focus on the impact point. It's a lagging indicator of perception. So perception is really important. Our ability to perceive the oncoming ball, our ability to perceive what's happening on the other side of the court in our environment. In this case, it's really important and beneficial to be able to judge the ball well. So if we're able to meet the ball at the correct height, it gives us an indication that we've actually judged the ball really well, that we've perceived it well, we're tracking it. Okay, so that's things like, is it short or deep, right? So often I see players, especially early on when they come to me, and this is at all levels again, where they're letting the ball drop. They're hitting it at knee height, whereas at the elite levels of the game, they're moving up on that ball. They're meeting it at the correct spot. So sometimes it's just a matter of they're not aware of it, but sometimes they're not good at judging the ball. And this is often the case more so with beginners and intermediate players, where there's a high ball coming to them, and instead of moving back to try and let that ball drop a little bit and meet the ball at the correct height, somewhere between that shoulder and hip area, they end up hitting the ball at head height or even higher, and that is obviously not ideal, and we'll get into why that is. But for the most part, it produces really poor quality shots. Next is tracking. So if you've perceived the ball well, you know more or less where it's going to go, you know where you want to go. Now you have to track it as it's coming towards you and make the necessary adjustments with your movement. So tracking is this relationship between perception and movement, and it can heavily influence our timing, which we're going to get to next. So that's our second reason: improved timing. So what is timing? In a nutshell, I really like this definition. A mentor of mine, Wayne Elderton, who defined timing in this manner. So it's a centered impact in an ideal relationship to your body for the shot you intend to hit. So what does that mean? So centered impact. So when we're looking at timing, it's important that we meet the ball in the center of the strings, the sweet spot. If you've ever hit the ball clean versus not clean, you know the feeling, you know the difference. So obviously we want to make contact centered. We want it to be clean. This produces the best quality strike. When we're talking about the ideal relationship to the body, general rule of thumb is if the ball is lower, our impact is going to be closer to the body, whereas when the ball is, higher and higher, it's going to be slightly further away from the body. And in terms of the shot that we intend to hit, obviously this goes back to the situation that we're in, the ball that we're receiving, the phase of play, all of these different things. So for example, a drive forehand is going to have a slightly different impact point and timing compared to a rally forehand and a defensive forehand. Right, so the impact point on a drive forehand is typically going to be higher. The impact point for a rally forehand is going to be around that hip or waist height area. And then the defensive forehand, that can vary, that can be more unpredictable depending on, if we're stretched wide, it's a desperation shot, what have you. And the third reason that it's important to focus on the impact point is that it produces better stroke mechanics. So when we're talking about mechanics, this is really simplified, but we have kinetics and kinematics. So kinetics has to do more with the forces and that basically cause motion, and kinematics is more a descriptor, of motion. So the different positions that the body gets into, the velocities of those of different limbs as they're moving through space, how far they're being displaced, the acceleration of these different segments, and so on. What's important, I think, here to know is that timing can be affected by these mechanics as a result of body segments and the timing of those segments. So are we rotating the hips and the trunk and allowing the shoulder to come through at the correct times? There's a sequence to this, okay? So there's a sequence and there's a timing element, and both are important. And if we have a better impact point, it tells us that we've judged the ball well, we've tracked it and moved to it correctly. We're going to meet it at the correct height for the shot that we intend to hit. And because of this, we're able to express better mechanics. We're able to put more force into the ground and then link that force up the chain to produce more, momentum and racket speed and so on, which imparts more speed on the ball or spin or whatever the case may be. But if we don't have the ideal impact point, then it's going to be really difficult for us to express good mechanics. So it doesn't matter how good your stroke is, if you're not in the right position for it, and that goes back to having the right impact point, then it'll just be very difficult to produce a good quality shot. just to kind of go full circle here, there are drills that you can work on. We work on the ability to track the ball up and back. I find that tennis players are actually pretty decent at tracking the ball left and right laterally. Not all players, but for the most part, players are pretty good at that. But they struggle a lot with up and back movements, and that's really important, okay? And that also includes, diagonal forward and diagonal backward movements. Focusing on a drill where you're actively thinking about moving up, back, or stay if the ball is already going to, be at the correct spot for the impact and the shot that you want to hit, or just something really simple to get started to bring some awareness to your impact point is simply rallying and then calling out yes or no. Did I meet the ball at the correct spot? So after you've hit the shot, did you meet it too low, too high, or was it ideal? Did you hit the ball clean? Was it centered? Yes or no? So bringing some awareness to it is a really good starting point before you tackle it further. It's important to sort of be demanding of yourself, not be sloppy in warm-ups and things like that. How many times are players allowing the ball to bounce twice? Things like that. I see it all the time walking by courts where amateurs are so focused on other things like their technique and so on, where this is still way more important, because you can't have good technique if you're not in the correct spot. Okay, so don't be sloppy in warm-ups, move up and back, catch the ball, meet the ball at the correct spot, and then don't get bogged down by pros, because pros, they have really good quality shots and really good control and all of that. So they often are already hitting the ball in the correct spot so that their partner, when you see them in warm-ups, so that their partner doesn't have to move much, because the ball's already, more or less in the right spot. So they just have to kind of focus on meeting the ball and timing it well. But for most players, there's always going to be slight variations and adjustments that need to be made forward, back, diagonal to meet the ball at the correct spot for either a rally ball or a drive ball. And then lastly, if you're playing against a partner who's kind of hitting the ball all over the court, they're not really consistent, that's actually a really good thing for you, because it gives you this opportunity to work on your ball judgment skills, your tracking skills, your perception abilities. And it's going to force you to move a lot to get into the right spot to meet the ball at the correct height. So it's actually good, and it's actually a drill that we often do where one player can hit anywhere and the other player hits back to one corner. And this really works on this perception tracking ability, while integrating a lot of movement into the drill. That's all I have for today. Hopefully you gain value out of this presentation. Please go work on your impact point. It's really important. Once you do that, I promise you're going to be hitting more consistently and better quality shots.